All right, let's count the Omer with our Al Sfirata Omer blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher tifanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al Sfirat HaOmer. Yesterday was the 39th day of the Omer, so you can figure out what today is. And we'll say the formula together. Hayom Arba'im Yom Deim Chamisha Shavuot Yamim LaOmer. Today is the 40th day, which makes
40th day,
5 weeks and 5 days to the Omer. All right, and now we can say our Sok B'divrei Torah blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher Sok B'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who's made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. All right, so now that we've thanked God for getting into the words of Torah, or in this case, the rest of the Tanakh, tonight we're going to be looking at the story of Ruth in honor of the upcoming holiday of Shavuot.
David, you are expanding your stuff. You're now going to 4-act stories.
It's true. Ruth is a 4-chapter book, so I felt like it would be challenging to compress it into 3 acts.
Can we finish that in 1 hour?
Yeah, we'll see. All right. Carol, would you read Ruth on 1 foot, please?
Are you asking me? Did I?
Sure, go ahead, Charles.
No, I misunderstood then, sorry.
That's all right, I was asking Carol.
I'll read it. What, you want to read it, Charles?
No, our names sound a little the same, and frankly, I was trying to suppress a yawn, so I wasn't quite sure. It's an hour later here, and I was doing quite a bit of exercise today, so I'm beginning to feel the hour of the day it is.
I'll read it. The story of Ruth is found in the Book of Ruth, in Hebrew, Megillat Ruth, literally the scroll of Ruth. It is part of the, I can't see it very well. It's part of the Ketuvim, or writing section of the Bible. The story is chanted on Shavuot Day 1, both because of the harvest and because she accepted Judaism.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, so now we know what we're doing. Let's get into chapter 1. Norma, would you read this, please?
In the days when the chieftains ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah, with his wife and 2 sons, went to reside in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and his 2 sons were named Mahlon and Chilion, Euphrates of Bethlehem in Judah. They came to the country of Moab and remained there. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth, and they lived there about 10 years. Then those 2, Mahlon and Chilion, also died. So the woman was left without her 2 sons and without her husband. She started out with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. For in the country of Moab, she had heard that the Lord had taken note of God's people and given them food. Accompanied by her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living, and they set out on the road back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Turn back, each of you, to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant that each of you find security in the house of a husband." And she kissed them farewell. They broke into weeping and said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi replied, "Turn back, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I any more sons in my body who might be husbands for you?" Oh, I lost my place.
At the top now.
Oh, okay. "Turn back, my daughters, for I am too old to be married. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I were married tonight and I also bore sons, should you wait for them to grow up? Should you, on their account, debar yourself from marriage? Oh no, my daughters, my lot is far more bitter than yours, for the hand of the Lord has struck out against me." They broke into weeping again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods. Go follow your sister-in-law." But Ruth replied, "Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me, if anything but death parts me from you." When Naomi saw how determined she was to go with her, she ceased to argue with her, and the two went on until they reached Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole city buzzed with excitement over them. The women said, "Can this be Naomi?" "Do not call me Naomi," she replied. "Call me Mara, for Shaddai has made my lot very bitter. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. How can you call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me, when Shaddai has brought misfortune upon me?" Thus Naomi returned from the country to Moab. She returned with her daughter-in-law, Ruth the Moabite. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Context: this is the first chapter of the Book of Ruth. The name Naomi means pleasant, while the name Mara means bitter. History and story is not inevitable. People and authors make choices. At what points in this part of the story could things have turned out differently?
Thank you.
And the one line about where they go, I will go, that's just been known by everybody for years.
Well, the father could have lived and the sons could have lived.
Would have been nice.
Ruth,
Would have been no story at all then.
Right.
another possibility is that Ruth could have just left and went back to Moab, just like
Her
the
people.
other daughter-in-law or sister-in-law, or it would be daughter-in-law, yeah.
Again, there would be no story.
Right.
Well, it would have been a different story.
Okay.
It would have been a different story if the sister-in-law went along with them back to Naomi's land.
Mm-hmm.
If there hadn't been a famine, they never would have left in the first place.
Naomi could have stayed put.
Oh, right.
Ruth would never have been born.
All right. Ruth becomes like Abraham, leaving her homeland and her family to follow Naomi to the land of Israel. What might she have been feeling or thinking on the way?
Well, Abraham had God who was protecting him and showing him the way, supposedly. So he felt quite comfortable, I think. I don't think the same was true for Ruth. She had Naomi, but she didn't know what she was getting herself into. I think she was probably a little bit more afraid, if that's our cautious, I guess.
We don't know what relationship Ruth had with her own family. And we don't know how her family looked on her when she married into Naomi's family. So she might have been conflicted. Maybe she had a bad relationship with her family, and that's why she wanted to go.
Well, and this goes along with the question you asked in the chat, about what are the upsides of moving, and maybe she was looking for a new adventure.
There's a midrash that says that Abraham broke the idols in his father's shop. Is there a similar midrash about Ruth having broken idols or broken away from idols?
Not that I know of. People have made modern midrashim dealing with Ruth's relationship with her family and why she might have wanted to, like how she might have absorbed Israelite traditions and beliefs while living with her Israelite husband and Israelite mother-in-law. But this is all modern midrash.
It may have been, I was going to say it may have been modern midrash, but it's those are things that do happen typically throughout the generations. I know we hear about it many times, and when Jews were moving from one place to another, and we see these different communities around the world, many times the men went out on their own and they found when they and other people, and then their mates absorbed, and they became incorporated into the community. It's not unusual.
David, I've got a textual question.
Mm-hmm.
On verse 20, where Naomi says, "Call me Mara, for Shaddai has made my lot very bitter." Why would the word Shaddai be used here? I mean, Sepharia says, if you click on Sepharia, it says Shaddai, or the Almighty. So why would Shaddai have been used as opposed to the other names of God? Or would this relate to the times in which this was written?
It may have had to do with the time when it was written. An answer that one perspective would give you is this name of God has to do with a certain aspect of God. So that's one way of explaining why certain names of God are used in certain situations.
Go with that, David. Good.
Yeah, the documentary hypothesis does not use Shaddai. Like, Shaddai does not come up as a name of God often enough for it to be ascribed to a certain possible author. It would be interesting to compare this to other situations in which Shaddai is used and see what comes up.
Would it have anything to do with the fact that we use a shin on the doorpost?
Possibly.
That she is coming home with Naomi. That is the Shaddai, the shin on Shaddai and the shin on the mezuzah.
Entirely possible. In answer to,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Gabriel.
Oh, I was just gonna say perhaps it could be a contrasting. I remember it was mentioned previously that Ruth's experience is similar to Abraham's. She's leaving her country and to a certain extent, her society, to join an entirely new civilization. She says that in the line where she's talking about Naomi's people becoming hers, Naomi's God becoming hers. Perhaps it could contrast the experience between the two, or maybe it's used in that sense. If Ruth's experience is somehow symbolic of Abraham's, reflecting like a similar relationship of trust. Abraham had a lot of trust in God. Naomi, or not Naomi, sorry, Ruth is clearly showing a lot of that. Maybe the expression could be used as sort of the opposite to contrast the way both of them are feeling about God at this time.
Hmm.
Because she's using the expression Shaddai in a way to sort of question like why did this bad thing happen to me? Why is God allowing this bad thing to happen to me? Maybe this is the way that I interpreted it. Especially since she's asking to be named Mara, which means like bitter. So that's the way I interpreted it, maybe.
Nice. I received something in the chat to answer the original question. I think that Ruth would have been experiencing some fear as she was a Moabite, and the Moabites had issues with the Hebrews at the time. Was she going to be accepted? How were people going to react to her being a Moabite?
I just thought of something that was in the introduction. It said
Yeah.
the book of Ruth was is read on the first day of Shavuot. And Asher Shalom B'nai Israel, it's read on the second day.
Interesting. I will have to do research into customs around when it is written, around when it is read. All right. Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah are all widows. How can individual members of today's Jewish community usefully support widows and widowers?
I mean, financially or socially? I keep thinking of what you might call group residences for seniors, which there are mixed company, if you will. The self-help home in Chicago, for example.
Yeah, I know Park and River Forest, there are one each. In fact, isn't there one in Naperville for the Sheridan, or is it, oh, it's in Elmhurst, I think. The Sheridan,
There are at least 3 that I know of.
okay, this
in
called
well,
Sheridan.
maybe even 4
Okay,
in Naperville.
so there are a lot.
There are a lot of them around. And you have a lot of social contact in those places, which is more what I was thinking. I was not thinking financial
Yeah, social.
necessarily, but
Yeah, and I like what Gary wrote, include people who are widow and widowers so that they don't feel left out. Remind them to come to things, invite them, check in on them.
You got a message in the chat about how it's a mitzvah to support widows, that it says multiple times in the Torah, particularly around holidays, actually, as we'll see next week, that that it's important to support the widows and the orphans and the stranger, basically the vulnerable people in society. And it comes up multiple times in the Torah about the importance of supporting widows and widowers. Somewhat relatedly, First, Ruth tells Naomi, "Your people will be my people." And then she says, "And your God will be my God." When have you helped others or been helped on grounds that you're part of a Jewish community?
Giving tzedakah. Taking meals to Shiva,
Yeah.
going to a Shiva house.
I,
Go ahead.
I thought of a couple of things I've done with friends of mine or coworkers that weren't observant. One is one friend I invited to Shabbat dinner when I was entertaining people for my shul. And another instance, when I was working, there was a woman, I gave her mishlach manot, even though she would probably not have even thought of such a thing.
I was in a terrible car accident when I was in Boston. And the Jewish community there just did everything for me. They shopped for me, they cooked for me, they came over to visit with me, and I never asked for it. And it was very moving.
Yeah. I have experienced that and that same thing in many instances, both in within our community and in Costa Rica, when my wife fell and fractured her skull, wasn't able to do much for quite a while, and people showed up, helped with everything. And when we moved into Oak Park, there were times when the Central Jewish Organization, they helped us on many occasions. We needed some support of one sort or another without getting into details. And of course, Har Zion as well. They just welcomed us to the community and were very supportive in a number of ways. And when we're in Costa Rica, we did the same for others who were searching and looking for something. Some folks who knew they were by descent were Jews but hadn't been practicing, and we gave them an opportunity to learn. Come in and just participate, no questions asked, and it made them feel much more comfortable. It gave them an introduction to the beliefs of their ancestors.
When Ruth says, "Your people will be my people and your God will be my God," this is widely seen as accepting membership into the Jewish people and the Jewish religion. What appeals to you about being part of the Jewish people, culture, and/or religion?
Having been born into it, I find that a hard question to answer. I've not experienced being outside of it.
I agree with you. I had the same thought.
It's part of my identity. I just can't imagine not being Jewish.
As someone who became Jewish, I think I would say, to this last question, I guess to sum up everything, the unification of, mitzvah and culture and everything all together in its history, was, and I guess is I say is because I guess I remember what it was like when I wasn't Jewish. I guess sort of was the thing that was appealing to me. All of Judaism's theology, its view of the whole nation as having a sort of priestly function. I believe in the end of the book of Exodus that's described, if that's correct, that the Jewish people is a nation of priests, and that the way we live out that calling is through the observance of mitzvot. That was one of the things, one of the most powerful things I think for me, as well, that sort of factored into my decision to join the people. So that's one way I guess I would answer that question.
I think one thing I might say that I like about the Jewish religion and culture is that we don't have one central authority telling us what kind of a strict life we have to live according to his or her dictates, that we are freer to modify our lives within the bounds of what Judaism is.
Rabbi, I entirely agree with you. Having grown up in a highly Orthodox community with very strict rules and guidelines that you had to follow, or you'd be ostracized by the Jewish community. I think it depends on what kind of community you're talking about when you answer this question.
It's true. I must admit, though, I find it very enlightening that I was agreed with by two people tonight. Doesn't happen often.
Another comment I got in the chat. For me, it's the harmony that the Jewish people have within the community. I love that connection and the culture of being loving and rich. All right, let's go on to Act 2. Gary, would you read this, please?
Sure. Now Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a man of substance of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, I would like to go to the fields and glean among the ears of grain behind someone who may show me kindness. Yes, daughter, go, she replied, and off she went. She came and gleaned in a field behind the reapers, and as luck would have it, it was the piece of land belonging to Boaz, who was of Elimelech's family. Presently Boaz arrived from Bethlehem. He greeted the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they responded, the Lord bless you. Boaz said to the servant who was in charge of the reapers, whose girl is that? The servant in charge of the reapers replied, she is a Moabite girl who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. She had been on her feet ever since she came this morning. She has rested but little in the hut. Boaz said to Ruth, listen to me, daughter. Don't go to glean in another field. Don't go elsewhere, but stay here close to my girls. Keep your eyes on the field. They
At the top of the screen.
Are reaping and follow them. I have ordered the men not to molest you. When you are thirsty, go to the jars and drink some of the water the men have drawn. She prostrated herself with her face to the ground and said to him, why are you so kind as to single me out when I am a foreigner? Boaz said in reply, I have been told of all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother in the land of your birth and came to a people you had not known before. May the Lord reward your deeds. May you have a full recompense from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have sought refuge. She answered, you are most kind, my Lord, to comfort me and to speak gently to your maidservant, though I am not so much as one of your maidservants. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, come over here and partake of the meal and dip your morsel in the vinegar. So she sat down beside the reapers. He handed her roasted grain, and she ate her fill, and he had some left over. When she got up again to glean, Boaz gave orders to his workers. You are not only to let her glean among the sheaves without interference, but you must also pull some stalks out of the heaps, leave them for her to glean, and not scold her. She gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned. It was about an ephah of barley, and carried it back with her to the town. When her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and when she also took out and gave her what she had left over after eating her fill, her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be he who took such generous notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law, whom she had worked with, saying, "The name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz." Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he of the Lord, who has not failed in God's kindness to the living or to the dead." For, Naomi explained to her daughter-in-law, "The man is related to us. He is one of our redeeming kinsmen." Ruth the Moabite said, "Even told me, stay close by my workers until all my harvest is finished." And Naomi answered her daughter-in-law Ruth, "It is best, daughter, that you go out with his girls and not be annoyed in some other field." So she stayed close to the maidservants of Boaz and gleaned until the barley harvest and the wheat harvest were finished. Then she stayed at home with her mother-in-law. Context. This is chapter 2 of the book of Ruth. In this chapter, Boaz acts like Rebecca at the well, going above and beyond what is expected and coming from the right family. A redeeming kinsman is somebody closely related to a husband that has died. The redeeming kinsman is supposed to marry the widow, produce a child who will be considered to be in the lineage of the dead husband. If the closest male relative didn't want to do this, he could waive his right, and the next closest male relative would need to step up or waive his right.
Okay, thank you.
David, I have a textual question.
Yes, textual question.
My understanding is that the gleaning is to be left for the poor at the corners of the field.
Yep.
Yet here it says that Boaz's maidservants were gleaning. Aren't maidservants part of his household?
Let's see. I'm looking at the text again to see where it talks about the
It's
maids.
his maidservants. It says, "Don't go to glean another field, don't go elsewhere, but stay here close to my girls."
It looks like the girls are the reapers. Or
And
amongst
down
the
below, then down below it said my maidservants toward the end.
in verse 13.
Answered.
Mhm.
And not so much of it, but he says to stay with his maidservants and gleaning.
Where?
You're jumping around too much.
At the end.
Find it.
So she stayed close to the maidservants of Boaz and gleaned until the barley harvest and the wheat harvest were finished.
Yes. Sounds like they're people from his household.
I want you to get burned.
Yes, I see why it looks like the maidservants are gleaning, but I think you can read the text such that she stayed close to the maidservants and she gleaned, but the maidservants may have been doing other aspects of the harvest.
Yeah, but in verse 21, stay close to my workers until my harvest is finished.
So the maidservants are the workers.
Equating the two, yes, in my mind.
Right. The maidservants are the workers, or are among the workers.
It
She
says
is
stay close to my until the harvest is finished. So isn't that?
So she is gleaning behind the workers. The maidservants are involved in the harvesting process. Ruth, as somebody who does not have a lot of money to buy food, is coming along behind them and picking up the things that get dropped or the things that get overlooked so that she can take food home. This is
it's left in the corners of the field. If you read, go back to our
right.
weekly readers and
So this brings us to question number 3, which I think will be the question we talk about for this chapter. Boaz is practicing the Torah commandments of Leket, letting the poor gather fallen crops, and Shichacha, letting the poor gather forgotten crops. Presumably, he is also following the third commandment of Peah, letting the poor harvest in the corners of the field. These rules are put in place to allow those without much money to get food with dignity. What would be an equivalent system today?
Welfare.
Food
Well-
pantries.
Yeah, food
Mhm.
pantry, a welfare system. Food stamps.
thrift
Just
stores.
except if they're gleaning for the grain, then they're working for it, whereas the food pantries, the poor aren't really working for it at that point. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying there's a difference between the two.
All right, let's go on to Act 3. Hinda, would you read this, please?
Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "Daughter, I must seek a home for you, where you may be happy. Now there is our kinsman Boaz, whose girls you were close to. He will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor tonight. So bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not disclose yourself to the man until he finishes eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he lies down and go over and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do, what you are to do." She replied, "I will do everything you tell me." She went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. Boaz ate and drank, and in a cheerful mood went to lie down beside the grain pile. Then she went stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. In the middle of the night, the man gave a start and pulled back. There, can't read it.
At the top.
There was a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. And she replied, "I am your handmaid, Ruth. Spread your robe over your handmaid. You are a redeeming kinsman." He exclaimed, "Be blessed of the Lord, daughter. The latest seed of loaves is greater than the first, and that you have not turned to younger men, but the poor or rich. And now, daughter, have no fear. I will do in your behalf whatever you ask. All the elders of my town know what a fine woman you are. While it is true I am redeeming kinsman, there is another redeemer closer than I. Stay for the night, then in the morning, if he will act as redeemer, good, let him redeem. If he does not want to act as redeemer, I will do so myself. And if Lord lives, lie down until morning." So she lay at his feet until dawn. She rose before one person could distinguish another, for he thought, "Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." And he said, "Hold out the shawl you are wearing." She held it while he measured out 6 measures of barley and he put it on her back. When she got back to the town, she came to her mother-in-law who asked, "How is it with your daughter? How is it with you, daughter?" She told her all that the man had done for her, and she added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying to me, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" And then we said, "Stay here, daughter. She learned how the matter turns out. The man will not rest, but will settle the matter today."
Okay, and the context, please.
This is chapter 3 of the Book of Ruth. Once the barley had been cut down, the grains must be removed from the husks around them. To do this, they are threshed, meaning whacked, in order to loosen the husks, and then winnowed, meaning they are thrown up into the air that the wind blows away, hush, and the rains fall into a pan.
Thank you. All right. Let's look at question number 4. Naomi tells Ruth that Boaz will tell her what to do, but actually Ruth tells Boaz what to do. This contravenes the stereotype as the female being the passive character in the story. When have you seen a stereotype not borne out in reality?
All the time.
Okay. Let's go on to Act 4. I want to make sure we have time to finish this.
Okay.
Naomi, would you read this, please?
Meanwhile, Boaz had gone to the gate and sat down there. And now the Redeemer whom Boaz had mentioned passed by. He called, "Come over and sit down here, so and so." And he came over and sat down. Then Boaz took 10 elders of the town and said, "Be seated here." And they sat down. He said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, now returned from the country of Moab, must sell the piece of land which belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. I thought I should disclose the matter to you and say, acquire it in the presence of those seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you are willing to redeem it, redeem. If you will not redeem, tell me that I may know. For there is no one to redeem but you. I come after you. I am willing to redeem it," he replied. Boaz continued, "When you acquire the property from Naomi and from Ruth, the Moabite, you must also acquire the wife of the deceased, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon his estate." The Redeemer replied, "Then I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own estate. You take over my right of redemption, for I am unable to exercise it." Now, this was formerly done in Israel in cases of redemption or exchange. To validate any transaction, one man would take off his sandal and hand it to the other. Such was the practice in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, "Acquire for yourself," he drew off his sandal. And Boaz said to the elders and to the rest of the people, "You are witnesses today that I am acquiring from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Shiloh and Malachon. I am also acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahalon, as my wife, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon his estate, that the name of the deceased may not disappear from among his kinsmen and from the gate of his hometown. You are witnesses today." All the people at the gate and the elders answered, "We are. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built up the house of Israel, prosper in Ephratah, and perpetuate your name in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Peretz, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the offspring which the Lord will give you by this young woman." So Boaz married Ruth. She became his wife, and he cohabited with her. The Lord let her conceive, and she bore a son. And the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be perpetuated in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you your old age, for he is born of your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons." Naomi took the child and held it to her bosom. She became its foster mother. And the woman neighbors gave him a name, saying, "A son is born to Naomi." They named him Oved. He was the father of Jesse, father of David. This is the line of Peretz. Peretz begot Hetzron. Hetzron begot Ram. Ram begot Amidadav. Amidadav begot Nachshon. Nachshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz. Boaz begot Oved. Oved begot Jess, and Jess begot David.
Okay, and the context, please.
This is chapter 4 of the Book of Ruth. Note the importance of community in celebrating Naomi's joy, even as she turns to the same community in her sorrow. Chapter 1.
Okay.
A lot.
Yeah.
All right. Let's look at number 4. By the end of the story, Naomi has gained an adopted daughter and a grandson. This ensures that she has somebody to remember her after her passing. What do you remember about your birth or adopted grandparents or parents?
One thing I would say about the story, it's a good thing that the fellow who was in line to redeem her didn't, or she had to go around calling him so-and-so all her life.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember my birth. Sorry, anybody here?
No.
Alternatively, you could answer number 5. Ruth and Boaz have very different backgrounds that they have to merge to create a family. How have you, or would you, go about doing that in your life?
Wow.
I think we all have to adapt our lives when we get married in
Mhm.
order to merge both families, because it's not just the woman or the man you're marrying, it's also the parents and the relatives that you are marrying into.
Yes.
I
For
don't
sure.
even
And some of the things
next
you
door
do
neighbors
because
going to the same show.
Yeah.
You've got
That's how my son found his wife, because even though Linda's 2 years ahead of him in Hebrew school, they went to Hebrew school together, so.
Okay, recognizing the time, I'll show you what else is in the source sheet, and then we will call it an evening. So there's a song written by Alicia Jo Rabins looking at the story of Ruth from a different perspective. There's a link so you can see the lyrics and some discussion questions about it. And then I rewrote this story as a play. So if you view things differently, looking at it in script form, then you can read through it there. I haven't changed any of the lines. And then if you want to see the entire story in one place, Appendix B has it all uninterrupted if you just like to read straight through. So,